Hello everyone, welcome to a new banner review. This time we'll be talking about changing winds. I'm a bit late covering this, but that's purely because I've been streaming Tree Houses last week and playing a different path afterward. Played two of the four paths of the game, so I had no time to really, work on videos. I'm back now, so expect to see the content I haven't covered yet coming up in the next few days, or even hours, depending, so yeah. But let's get started with this banner, eh? As per usual, going to go from worst to best. This time starting with Mercedes, surprising literally no one. This is a potential demote, mind you, because, well, I mean, Brady got demoted. Brady is just overall slightly better on low merges, though Mercedes do have her own thing going for her that actually makes her somewhat decent. I'd say a fairly solid unit for Arena or other such mode, where you would just want to have a healer with, say, Pain Plus, with, say, Colorless Dual Infantry, with, say, Ploys, a supportive unit. She's quite good at that. In fact, better than Brady, because Brady is a good fighter, but as far as a supportive unit, he does not bring any ploys to the table. Speaking of Brady, this is going to be the comparison I'm going to be making, as every other comparison just doesn't really work. You could say Mikoto is a comparison you can make, but Mikoto doesn't have bulk, unlike Mercedes, and Mikoto does not have any pro utility. Same thing with Loki, and Loki does have a pref, but outside of AR, set pref tends to be rather underwhelming. And even in AR, Fjorm tends to just have a better pref for what she's meant to be doing. So yeah, overall you have Mercedes here, which is a honestly fairly solid unit. But at the same time, not that great. Her kit is very underwhelming, as you can see. All she really has is just an AR skill, which nobody cares. AR skills are dead on arrival, just like the mode it feels like nowadays. But other than this, as you can see, they are very similar. Like I said, the main thing Mercedes has going for her is a ploy utility. She can definitely be used offensively, but if you're going to be using her offensively, Brady tends to do just as well, if not better. So going into builds now, as I said, the build to the left, if you're not going to be using ploys or sabotage, Brady is just going to do better overall. But as you can see, she can indeed reach certain levels that makes her fairly solid. 59 attack and 49 speed is no slouch by any stretch. And at that point, if you're going to be going for a plus 10, you might want to ditch speed plus for attack plus instead, therefore reaching 62 attack and 46 speed. 43 res is also very solid, and 37 res for the ploy check is quite solid, since ploy do happen before the buff happens. 37 is still fairly solid, very consistent, and just overall very helpful. The other set is a absorb set, just like Brady. The one thing that she has going for her, however, is that she can go def plus with attack def bond, which makes her overall bulkier than Brady. As the thing with Brady is that he has, as you can see, 23-28 defensively. Which means with attack def bond you have 28-28. If you go def plus or res plus, whatever will happen with dragon is that they will hit the lowest stat, which means your boon is useless against them. And your boon is also useless against either armored DC unit, or is going to be useless against mages. So overall, or even bow and dagger units if you're going res plus. So overall, it's a bit iffy to go with either def or res plus, which means it's better to go speed plus or attack plus on him, either for bigger heal, bigger damage, or more speed overall. So as a result, she does end up being a bit bulkier. 40 defense and 43 res, and also 40 speed. I'm sure a few people still remembers my Lachesis and wonders how well she stacks against Mercedes. To put it simply, Lachesis is just worse in every single stats than Mercedes. So yeah. Except attack, I believe. Or no, not even attack. She's still behind by 1 point in attack. So yeah, you can get the idea. She will prevent more doubles, she will have more bulk, she's just overall better. And Lachesis is still by no means a useless unit, so yeah. Mercedes is overall really strong. A lot of people think that her stat line is very underwhelming, but to be fair, I felt the same at first until I really ended up crunching a few numbers. Then her stat line felt a lot better than, you know, what people give her credit for. Moving on to Petra. Boy, oh boy, IS just does not understand what color helps for. You see, the very first time we got colored dagger, I actually defended them, because they were on dancers. Dancers don't have a whole lot of stats to work with. Therefore, having color advantage to help them tends to be very, very helpful in making them able to do things that they would otherwise not be able to do. However, for an aggressive dagger that actually does not have the dancer penalty, like Petra, it's not as good, is it? So, you have a dagger with cooldown -1, already there it's clear she's meant to be an aggressive unit. On top of that, the attack speed, def, res can all be increased by up to 5 depending on what you have, which there is a unit that actually does work for the attack, def, and res all at once while providing support to this unit. Well, more information on that a bit later. And so overall you can have an extra 5 attack, def, and res on top of a cooldown -1 weapon, on top of being a range unit, on top of having access to goads. And you're telling me what you're going to do with all this is to put a color on her? Between the fact that she's meant to use either axes or sword weapons, which is basically the two things that she has really leveled up when you recruit her, beside that and the fact that, you know, this is a very aggressive weapon, it's kind of ironic that you take a unit that's either red or green and make it blue, but also make it a throwing unit, which there is no such thing in tree houses. And then after that you put a color on the said dagger for no reason. I get the hunting blade, I get what reference it is. The hunting blade is a reference to a gift that she likes in the game, but still, it's ridiculous. Either just don't put her in this banner, or at least bring a lance unit or something of the sort that actually would make sense. Ferdinand could be a lance unit, Sylvain could be a lance unit with the Lance of Ruin, or anything of the sort. That would have made so much more sense than Petra here. Oh well. So, other than this, here comes attack speed form 3, which is basically Muspel Fire Posey, which Bright Tarja had. Except this time it also gets an extra 1 attack and 1 speed. Now, this skill is overall rather underwhelming. It's basically attack speed bond, but if you have 3 people around you, it is better. Otherwise, it is either equal or worse. Okay, but why not just run attack speed solo and be literally better in 90% of the cases? That's stupid, isn't it? Yet here we are. Fantastic. I get that the idea is so it synergizes with aerobatics, but if you're going to be using aerobatics, you're just going to be using a bond skill. And not attack speed bond, because for fuck's sake, her speed is so high. She has 38 speed, a weapon can push that speed up by an extra 5. You have access to Own Flyer, you have access to Gold Flyer. Why in God's name are you going to be running attack speed form on her? You won't. You would be running attack res form or attack def form, but not attack speed form. For some reason, IS is really just hell-bent on making character overkill in speed, when the speed meta has been dead for over a year. No one really wants over 50 speed. No one. And for some reason they decide, okay, so with this you can have like 45 speed, and with Ohm Flyers that's 51 speed. Woo! Great, but no, you don't want this. Especially since the best meta for her to be used in is a gold emblem meta. Or on higher merges you can actually use her in a ward emblem. But like, for some reason attack speed form is there. That's going to be a skill you're going to get rid of 90% of the time. As far as comparison goes, there's none. There's none because she's a fairly unique unit. As in, she is the only flying dagger unit with a def stat. So, I mean, there's that, and without a rest stat also, apparently. And, yeah, so, it's kind of just how it is. I can't really make any comparison, and the other comparisons are all colorless. Honestly, if Kagero had more def, I would say she's still better than Petra, because, I mean, colorless. The way you're meant to use colored unit is to put this on support unit. Because support unit can't really fight nearly as well as any other unit, so they actually want the combat triangle to be in their favor, which actually helps them a lot in the long run. For a unit that's meant to be a damage dealer, being anything else than colorless is nothing but a pain in the ass. Especially for a dagger unit. A blue dagger unit? Seriously? Have you seen the amount of green tank this game has? And blue tanks? What are you doing? But, oh. Moving on to builds, and, well, this is really the main one I can think of. A bond set using aerobatics. This way you can reach 40 defense, 38 res, and keep in mind, this is without the dagger working. The best teammate to use with Petra is Camilla. The one thing you don't want, however, is an attack plus Petra if you're going to be doing this. Because if you don't have attack plus, using an attack plus Camilla literally gives you 5 attack, 5 def, 5 res, on top of the 10 attack, 5 def, 5 res that the bonds gives you when you use flyer formation or aerobatics to something similar. I realize now that this should have been flyer formation and not aerobatics. My bad on that one. But still, so essentially you'd have 45 defense and 43 res. You are tanky as all hell already. The speed doesn't matter. But keep in mind Camilla does have a weapon that is a support weapon that actually does help quite a bit for Petra. So say you're running gold flyer with Camilla's axe, that's 7 attack, 7 speed, plus 5 attack, plus 5 def, plus 5 res because, you know, Petra's weapon, plus 10 attack, 5 def, 5 res because of the bonds. Oh, and Blue Flame actually works now because it's next to another unit, so you get a 25 damage output. So even if you take a hit, you get to proc Blue Flame because of the cooldown -1. To put it simply, Camilla with Gold increases your attack to 63. The bonds pushes that to 73. The weapon pushes that to 78 attack. 78 attack, plus proccing Blue Flame if the enemy hits you back, tends to kill a whole lot of things, let's just put it that way. And your speed will still be at 55, which is, again, overkill as all hell, but, I mean, you just want the attack more than anything. Because you already are bulky enough in def and res. This makes her a overall fairly solid unit, just held back by her color. It feels very much like Lynn all over again. I've been asked a few times also how well does impact skill work on Petra, and all I have to say is, it doesn't matter. Why would you care about blocking a follow-up if the enemy is dead on your second hit? That's what happens all the time. And at that point you'd rather want to have more bulk on multi-phase than just having more bulk on initiation. At least that's the way I see it. Because at that point you can use her defensively and offensively. You can even run close counter and use that pretty well. So, again, why would you? You can also run Brazen if you want to use her in any other team comp that doesn't use aerobatic, fly formation, and so forth. It works just as well, it's just aerobatics combos into Blue Flame better. And if you don't have Blue Flame, typically you're gonna have to be switching to something like Bonfire. Anyway, moving on to Hilda. Now, Hilda is a weird unit because she's trying to be two things at once. She's basically trying to be Lef, the cat girl, or Brave Lucina, depending on the situation. It's weird. She actually power creeps Brave Lucina if the condition is fulfilled. If the condition is not fulfilled, she is a slightly better Lef, I guess, because unlike Lef, she has a better stat line and access to much better tools. Now, yet again, we come in with Attack Speed Solo, a useless skill that does not help the unit that has it, because for some reason it needs to be on a unit with 37 or more speed. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. To put it simply, Frick Hugel, Attack Speed Solo, and a speed buff pushes your speed to 55. Unmerged. Actually no, Frick Hugel pushes it to 58. I forgot the 3 innate speed it gives for no reason. Honestly, if Frick Hugel gave attack, I would be a lot more interested in the weapon, but as it doesn't, it's quite underwhelming, let's just put it that way. So yeah, another unit that has way too much speed and not enough of everything else. Death Opening makes sense for her, however you'll probably be replacing this for Death Tactic or anything that actually provides death buff to everyone but her. Because that way you can actually help more units at once. Now our weapon requires a lot of positioning or just completely giving up on one or the other effect. For example, running Life and Death, lowering your defense so it's so low that everyone gets 4 attack and 4 speed. Or, on the other hand, you could just be saying, oh, well, I'm just going to become super bulky so I get more attack. Because the speed is useless, as I mentioned earlier. So as a result, you can just push your def in the 40s, and then suddenly you have an extra 6 attack. Makes you very similar to Linus, as you'll by no doubt see when I get to the comparison. So overall, she's a very good buffer. As far as a damage dealer, I'd say our weapon is not that great and might also want to be replaced for maybe a slaying weapon in some cases. Not because the 6 attack is bad, but rather the 9 speed is very unneeded, so it becomes pretty dead stat-ish. But if you think the 6 attack is better for one build in particular, which you'll see soonish, which is mostly for the fact that it's a 16 might weapon, then I can kind of see why. Though I'll be obviously mentioning what the other option becomes. As for comparison, Linus really is the only comparison you can make. Which, if I'm gonna be honest, it's a weird position. Because Linus and Hilda are very similar. As a matter of fact, you can make a case that Linus is better at certain things that I will be showcasing Hilda for. Let me just put it next side by side also so you understand a bit more. This is the stat line with max out flowers and everything. As you can see, they basically both reach a sufficient amount of speed. They have the same defense. He has 4 more health than her, 8 less res. And as far as attack goes, they're basically tied for the most part. Yes, a weapon can push it back to 67. However, like I said, this requires positioning, whereas Linus does not, which makes him a lot easier to use and really abuse all those stats. Not to mention, despite life and death, you can also still remove life and death and still have enough speed like a sufficient amount with just speed plus, or not speed plus, but like a speed refine with a speed buff, pushing your speed to 49, which is more than enough. And at that point you actually have a bit less attack. However, you also have an extra 5 defense and only is behind by 3 res. That's kind of nasty, don't you think? So yeah, overall Linus is, in my opinion, if you're going to be using Hilda purely aggressively, a better unit, because he is a lot cheaper and we've gotten not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 copies of him for free. At this point, you have easily enough for a +4 if you have not sacrificed him for brazen attack speed, and he's a very solid unit. Very solid indeed. Better than Raven because he has better bulk where it matters. So, yeah. That said, that does not mean Hilda is absolutely irrelevant compared to Linus. All it means is that as far as damage dealer goes, it's not great. So let's talk about builds, shall we? So the set on the left is there mostly to make her a very solid unit. Do keep in mind that Brazen are not considered when looking at the check for Freykugel. In other words, yes, she might look like she has 48 defense, but the check really only takes in consideration 41 defense. This allows her to hit 48 def, 47 res, as well as 70 attack. Makes her a very solid damage dealer, and like I said, while it is a very solid damage dealer, it is a bit iffy because overall Linus can do roughly the same kind of thing. Just because, well, you know, the speed is a bit overkill, the attack is very similar, so the only thing that she really has going for her is bulk, which is why I build her up with bulk in mind, 48 def, 47 res. So overall Hilda can become a bulkier Linus, and with this in mind. The set on the right is meant to be a buffing set. Now you might be wondering why Life and Death if you have so much speed. Life and Death is the highest attack increasing A slot that you can have. And you also want your Def to be lower. So, to put it simply, I want the Def to be as low as possible so everyone on the team gets 4 attack and 4 speed. I want the attack to be as high as possible so Life and Death becomes the only real option. The speed is completely irrelevant of Life and Death. It's just you want to get the stat down for Def and the stat up for attack for AoEs. AoEs only consider the stat on the status screen, so 71 attack, that's all that's considered. Even if you had like 50 drive attack around there, it would not do anything to improve her damage. So as a result, you really just want to have as much damage on the stat page as possible, so Life and Death becomes the no-brainer as a result. Special Spiral plus Flashing Blade allows you to prog the AoE consistently. If all you want to do is an AoE buster, however, you will want to just get rid of Freykugel altogether and run Slaying Edge, running it into an attack buff, or an attack refine rather, and then running attack plus 3 as a seal, making you a slightly better AoE buster. Though, like I said, Linus does that job better because he has a Life and Death weapon, because his weapon has cooldown -1 to begin with, because overall his attack stat becomes higher than Hilda. Hell, if you run double Life and Death, you're hitting 76 attack. Even if you go with attack plus 3 as a seal and a Slaying Edge, you only hit 74 on Hilda. So Linus is just better as an AoE buster. However, if you consider this an AoE buster that also buffs your team, then that becomes a lot more interesting, doesn't it? Now, you see you have 33 def here. You don't want to have a def buff, but it's just in case. If you have a team that all has 34 or more def, that's fine, you can have the def buff, and it won't matter, because at that point you still have the lowest defense. So that's also why I want Def Tactic on her, because you want everyone on your party to have more def than she does. That's why normally you want to buff every stat but defense on Hilda. With that said, let's go for the strongest unit of this banner, which was quite a surprise, but a welcome one all the same. Best boy of Black Eagle, after all. As far as best character goes, I don't know. It would be between Petra and him. He's definitely the most entertaining of the bunch. That said, what about his stats? Well, to put it simply, he's basically Lilina with a speed stat. And a very strong weapon. That weapon is busted beyond belief. It's surprising it's even an inerritable weapon. It makes sense though, considering, you know, he's kind of a sly fox in his own game. That it's a fox tome, but this tome basically just inflicts -4 to all stats to the enemy unit, which is fantastic because it also lowers special damage. It requires him to initiate, however, which is kind of a bit of a bummer. But that said, he's very busted. 39 attack is the second tied for second highest attack of this game. Highest being Keaton, which is basically a glorified armored unit, and the one he's tied with is ironically Edelgard. So you know, he's actually quicker than Edelgard, in fact, and actually has quite a bit of bulk. Even from a unmerged perspective, you are, and without an A scale, in fact, he's looking at 60 bulk overall. That's really good. 66 with a buff. That makes him a very strong unit, but you can also do a lot of things that characters such as Lilina can't do. Not because they're bad per se, but because they actually struggle in setting up. Hubert has a lot of bulk, Lilina does not. So as a result, characters such as Lilina can't really set up a Blade Tome Vantage set, while Hubert can. Absolutely can, with very little difficulty. Rider Fox is also really strong, and because his attack is so high and his speed is just at the right margin to actually hit really high amounts of speed on high merges, this makes him a very threatening unit on high merges. As far as comparison goes, this is really the only three I can compare, and like I said, Hubert gets to the very good number of speed where speed doesn't become overkill. Despite not having a brazen, despite not having any of these things. So, to put it simply, if he initiated with his base weapon, his speed goes from 32 to 36 essentially. You can refine that to 38 speed. You can run Fury 3 for 41 speed. Not even 4, by the way. Then you can buff his speed up to 47. This is the magic number already, and frankly, you can still go further if you need him to. Yeah, he's already quite speedy, so the fact that the other two beats him in speed doesn't really matter all that much in the grand scheme of things. The fact that Ragnarok gets 5 speed, and the fact that he gives another 7 speed when you're in Brazen doesn't matter either. Because at the end of the day, if they all double the same units, what's the point, right? Now, as for everything else, 60 bulk on Hubert, 61 on Silica, and 60 on Tarja. So they're basically very similar in terms of bulk. Yes, of course, Hubert is a bit more res, but it's a bit of a wasted stat. So there's that. And yes, Dragon Flowers do get in play, in which case it does actually increase their bulk by 2. So he is behind a slight bit. He's behind by like 3 bulk on Silica, 2 bulk on Bright Tarja. However, I do want to point out one thing. If you consider Ragnarok and the 5 attack it provides, Silica reaches 53 attack with the Dragon Flowers, whereas Hubert reaches, well, let's say 51 plus the weapon effect, that's 55 attack, because he reduced the enemy res by 4. So all of a sudden, that's not bad, isn't it? 39, 51, 55, plus then the Dragon Flower, that's 56. That beats Celica by 3. Yes, Celica gets better after one fight, as long as you have Fury and you're not too merged. But Hubert overall does not require any setting up. He's already very busted from the get-go, which makes it a bit easier in setting up. If you have to deal with very annoying units, he can still pull his weight and actually set up at the same time, which is very helpful. Because Celica will be behind in attack, so missing a kill can definitely happen here and there. Now, it's not enough to really make her that much worse than Hubert, but I do think Hubert is overall just a slightly more consistent Celica. Not to mention, like I said, the speed doesn't matter, the bulk is roughly the same, the attack is basically the same, but that tome is just really busted. And another thing is that both Bright Tarja and Celica are very reliant on one thing, okay? They're reliant on their tome, which means they have no versatility whatsoever. Well, more or less. In Tarja's case, she can still run a Blade Tome reliably well, and Celica, well, there's no point in running a Blade Tome, for the most part. But then you have Hubert, and Hubert is just... he has more attack from the get-go, so like a Vintage Blade Tome set is better on him than on any of those two units. In fact, it's better on him than literally any other red mage this game has. Period. That's how good it is. But he can also use his tome rather well, or even Al tomes, or even quite a few things can work with this guy in general. Raise an attack def with Brazen Def Res, and you're already looking, for example, at 33 def and 32 res. And then you add buff, 39, 38. See what I mean? And he has definitely the bulk to reach those Brazens. That's what I mean. In general, he can be... you can basically make him whatever you want him to be. For the most part, of course. And because he has so much attack, you don't really have to work on set attack all that much, because he already has the attack to work with. So, moving on to builds. Now, surprising no one of the set is a Blade Tome Vintage set. As you can see, Hubert right here with attack def bond pushes his attack to 70, and then with all the Blade Tome buffs, 94 attack. 94 attack. Do you see what I mean here? How fucking busted he can be? 94 attack is typically enough to one-shot most things you come across unless they're blue, and even if they're blue, you tend to be able to one-shot them just as well. So yeah, very, very strong unit. Even with a color disadvantage, you're basically looking at 76 attack. That's 50 damage on someone with 26 res. Yeah, kind of busted, isn't it? The other set on the left is more of a overall slightly bulky set. I don't know why I run Ruptured Sky here, or rather Heavy Blade. Oh, I get. Actually, no, I get. It's Heavy Blade in case you don't have any counter attack. If you are not afraid of not having enemies that won't be able to counterattack you, you can remove Heavy Blade and run something else, such as Attack Def 2, for example. Or a Brazen, that also works just as well. So, if Fox is active, you're looking at, right now, 68 attack, 46 speed, 43 defense, and 39 res. Oh, actually, 42 res. The weapon is not refined here, but it's a refinable weapon. The reason why I did not refine it to res is because for some reason the unit builder website fucked up and did not actually add a res refine option on the build. So I had an extra 3 res and 2 HP, I think. Or 3 HP and... I'm not too sure, it's been a while. Point is res basically just jump up by 3. So as a result, it's more like 43-42 bulk. Makes him very difficult to just bait out, and even if you initiate on him, he still has quite a bit of stats to work with. Moving on to the second set of build, which is an obvious just run the Blade Tome into the fucking ground set. With this set, you get 6 attack from Swiss Sparrow, pushing your attack to 74, and then because of Blade Tome, your attack goes up to 98. Yes, you are currently looking at 98 attack and 49 speed. And if that wasn't enough, you're looking at 74 bulk at the absolute worst right now. That's how busted Hubert can be. It's like a goddamn truck. But unlike most units that can just hit really hard once, he can actually hit really hard twice. And not only that, but hit twice while also being able to have some bulk to be able to take blows, which units such as Lilina just cannot do. So yeah, in conclusion, I'd say the whole banner is fairly solid in their own ways. I'm looking forward to Mercedes probably being demoted in a few days or a few weeks. I don't know how much time it has left to exist until it disappears. The sooner the better, so I have more chance to get Mercedes if she does indeed get demoted. But other than that, I suppose that's all I have to say about the banner. Hopefully this was informal, and as per usual, have a nice one, everyone. See ya!